right, the next speaker is Joseph Yracheta. He is brilliant. He is hardworking. He has been my friend and colleague. I will drive gladly across multiple states to be with him. For whatever reason, he chooses to be in the same room with me. So please, let's give a round of applause to soon-to-be Dr. Yracheta.
Is this on? Okay. Data Yracheta kanani cheri simorani haraparani hatik sikha hisasi hamashaka ini hureta mohimbo hi purepecheska ka huchete tatecha ariko hesinti Maria Kamanueli hi aringa shinga tsikwapu tinapu tate kichi naji imachiapi. My name is Joe Yracheta. So I just introduced myself in my native language, which is Purepecha. So the Purepecha aren't very well known. They're known by the Spanish label Tarascan. And just like the Navajo don't want to be the Navajo and the Sioux don't want to be the Sioux, they want to be Lakota. We all got these names from white colonists and we don't like them. But we don't know about the Purepecha for a couple of reasons. One is as a nation state in the three empires of Mexico, the Maya, the Aztecs, and the Purepecha, they were the ones that gave everybody the hardest time because their origin is from South America, and so they had most of the metallurgy. So they were, where the Aztecs and everybody else were using obsidian's pointed weapons, we were using metal weapons at the time. The other reason is there was a guy named Bertrand Guzman who tortured and murdered, and he got pulled by the Spanish. He was so horrible. He got pulled by the Spanish and arrested and taken to Spain and put into prison because of what he did to the Purepecha. So the Purepecha since then have been sort of recuperating from all of that trauma. But the two questions from the last thing. So the corn, the Balsas region, that's where my people are from. So the Balsas region, or the river, is right on the border between Guerrero and Michoacan. But it was 9,000 years ago, and the Purepecha didn't get there until 2,000 years ago, so I can't take credit for that. And in terms of the scaling question, I'm part of Winona LaDuke's Indigenous Farming Conference often, which is held in Minnesota. And what we keep saying is that European descendants are picky, super picky, because with those three sisters, you can eat a lot of it that you guys throw away. Like the seeds are probably the most nutritious concentration of foodstuffs in that trio, but in a lot of other spaces as well, because it's protein, it's fiber, it's all kinds of elements and vitamins in there. The other one is you can eat bean greens. You don't just have to eat the beans. You can also eat the flowers from squash, which you guys don't eat. And then creating corn or processing corn into a more bioavailable form of corn by soaking it in lye, which is nixtamalization, which you have in tamales or tortillas, is another way to make that Three Sisters trio much more available. Plus we eat bugs. We eat a lot of bugs. We eat grasshoppers. We eat the larvae that infect those Three Sisters and other crops. And we eat, which mostly have been eradicated in the United States, we eat the fungus called Yracheta that grows on the corn, which is now, because you guys figured it out, is now like this boutique mushroom that is like what are the pigs? Truffles. So yeah, there's lots of stuff. All right, moving on. So I am Purepecha and Raramuri, the ones that run those long barefoot races. And I am not the good kind of Indian. I'm the ones that chop off your head and cut your heart out, drink your blood, and throw you down a mountain. And I'm only saying that because we've talked a lot about science, Western science, philosophy, open data, which I'm going to get into here in a minute. But that border is fake, right? And the division in anthropology and archaeology is that any natives north of that border are tree-hugging, seed-eating, white welcoming, great people, they're peaceful, and then everybody south of that border, whether they're in the Amazon or the Andes or in Mexico, they're just going to kill you. And so right now that's why ICE is going to come get me in a few minutes. But you know, in a lot of ways, this administration has helped the movement, the Indigenous data sovereignty movement that a lot of us are a part of, because it has woken tribes, both in North America and South America, to the Monroe Doctrine and Manifest Destiny, and this huge data grab that they're using with what I call the second era of discovery, or you know, the final solution for Indigenous people in the Americas, right? So our American Holocaust has been going on since 1492, and it's continuing today. You can see it with the kids in cages. You can see it here in the United States with them taking water resources and lithium resources and everything else. So, but now you guys are all in the same boat. You feel our pain because we're not in the cage with the 1,200-pound gorilla by ourselves. You are now with us in that cage, right? Palantir, Musk, Regeneron, United States government, you guys are in there with us now. So you know what it feels like to be a Black or Indigenous person. So I was just a couple of weeks ago in DC for Bridge to AI, and the researcher has always kind of been on the hook, but now they're really on the hook. So back, I'm old, I'm 60. I started in 1990 in this endeavor, and we were still doing our statistics by hand, and we were lucky if we had a data set larger than 500 people. But now with computing, we can have these huge data sets of 10,000 people, collect them really quickly, and do all the statistics and reanalyze, and data lives forever and all that kind of stuff. But the burden of research still goes to the researcher, but the profits goes to everybody else. So the Bayh-Dole Act has given power to your university legal departments and left you high and dry. And then you have to be subject to federal government policies or regulations, which are not laws, but you're still subject to them, right? And you also have to be accountable to the participants, right? And so when we were there was so many researchers that were worried they were going to get sued because they're violating consent, because the consent language and the policies and then sharing the data to corporations has not been discussed with the participant. So in this picture, the researcher is going to take all the heat. So my whole talk is trying to get us to collectivize as scientists to say we're not going to stand for that anymore. We have big brains. We went to school for a long time. We do things for free mostly, but we're subject to all of these business assholes. We have to stop that. And now, Indigenous people and other vulnerable populations, could be a tree, it could be corn, it could be fungus, it could be whatever. We're looking for those outliers because those are what's going to make money, and that's what the business people are interested in. They're not interested in improving the quality of life for anybody. So we have marginalized people all over the world. I hate Global South because Argentina's in the South, Australia's in the South. It's really the equatorial regions, the non-white populations. So please stop saying Global South. And then we have Indigenous people in the Americas. And then on one side, we have open data, the open data movement, which got sort of codified by NASM in 2013, which is a really bad idea, and I can't stand FAIR. And Crystal and I were talking about the authors of FAIR, saying it's being misapplied and misunderstood, misinterpreted, and it's hurting everybody. And so they are coming out with a new FAIR standard because FAIR sucks. And now China's the good guy in all of this stuff because the United States acts so poorly. So me and my group with NativeBio, so just quickly, NativeBio, the idea started at the UW Seattle back in 2009 during this sort of renaissance of Indigenous students from all kinds of disciplines, and we were all graduate students working locally in the Seattle area, working in Eastern Washington, working in Vancouver, working in Portland, to bring all these STEAM activities to kids and to help tribes manage their own data and make sure they're not getting screwed. So from that was the idea of NativeBio data and the beginnings of Indigenous data sovereignty. So we started predicting that all of this stuff was going to go haywire, and of course it did with Doge and Palantir. So open data might be theft, open data is theft. Just real quickly, at least in the indigenous context here in the United States, Havasupai was sort of the first volley. None of those people really suffered. The university didn't suffer. Quite the opposite, the Havasupai and tribes suffered as being whiny little ankle biters, but that's not really what happened. What happened was the researchers did bad things. They acted outside of consent, and then nobody held them accountable. Then you think this is all in the past, but this happened just in 2022. Tulalip spent $10 million of their own money, gave it to Stanford. They had a cannabinoid product that they had taken as far as they could. They wanted Stanford to figure the rest of it out to development. And then Stanford, behind their back, because again, Western law has created all of these loopholes for Western people. They took that same cannabinoid and made a synthetic version and patented that. The tribe found out about it, sued them, they settled out of court for some large amount of money because Tulalip is very, very wealthy and can sue the pants off you. But not all tribes have that money. The other one was Taxol, which I'm going to go into detail a little bit. So Taxol is product from the Pacific yew tree that grows from Portland all the way to Alaska. It also goes some parts of East Asia. But Native Americans had been using it for a long time for a variety of things, including cancer. So when this got sort of discovered in 1979, DuPont, which is big in Washington State, and a bunch of other companies sort of put out this bounty on the trees, and everybody, college students, homeless people, everybody was going into the forest and stripping the bark off of these trees and selling it to these chemical companies so that they can produce this blockbuster cancer drug. And now they've got like 5 or 7 analogs, and it's still making tons and tons of money. So what I want to show you is the timeline to discovery is going to be majorly altered by AI. The breadcrumbing capacity to steal indigenous resources, at least according to what I read, is 5 years. So if you go to Taxol, it was first described in 1849. It was considered a trash tree. Nobody wanted it. It's a very slow-growing tree. It wasn't good for timber or building houses. It was described as a medicinal and ceremonial tree in 1890 to 1920. It was shown to be cytotoxic to cancer cells in 1964. Its mechanism of action was elucidated in 1979. Clinical trials was 84 to 85, and approval in 1992, a total of 143 years. Some tribes did try to sue, just like, if you guys didn't know, the state of Hawaii tried to sue the creators of Plavix. But what the pharmaceutics do is they branch out and break off into 3 or 5 companies, so you're chasing which one you have to sue. So the state of Hawaii was, I think they were successful in suing 2 of those 5 companies. With Taxol, the tribes gave up early. The pharmaceutical companies themselves are still trying to sue each other over who owns Taxol or Taxol derivatives. But in the meantime, they cut down all the trees, and the trees that were remaining standing were, they bought the land, and the tribes were excluded from them. So I went to Alaska last year. The tribes are like, how do we get access to this? Because we don't only use it for medicine, we use it for ceremony. And they can't get access to the trees. But if they had taken the time and done science like we all say we do, they would have found out that the tree doesn't make the drug. It's the epiphytic fungus under the bark of the tree that makes the drug. And it's the enzyme inside the epiphytic fungus that makes these unique chiral centers that makes Taxol possible. But they didn't care. They were only worried about money. They weren't cared about the trees. They didn't care about indigenous people. They didn't even care about cancer. They cared about money, and they destroyed this resource. So now with artificial intelligence, a similar indigenous product. So in the old days, it was the military, then historians, then ethnobotanists, then if you're lucky, a doctor or some medical researcher, and then finally pharmaceutics companies, right? That's the old progression. Now it's artificial intelligence. You can go virtual screening, millions of compounds, anything digitized in a library. By the way, the Nagoya Protocol, which was supposed to protect native resources, they do this at the UN all the time. Indigenous people were not called for the vote. They held the vote at like 1 in the morning. They only had the international lawyers they wanted there. They voted to take everything off the table in the indigenous purview if it was not just in a book, but if it was in a museum shelf, in the basement, in a locked cabinet. So they took all of that off the table for tribes to protect, right? So if it's been digitized, AI will screen weeks to months. They will optimize medicinal molecular structure from that virtual information. They'll do virtual toxicity and dosing experience in year 2. They'll optimize trial design. They may do some cell culture testing or animal testing. Then they'll optimize patient recruitment for special populations in year 4. And then theoretically get approval in 5 years. So we're really in a crunch. The window's closing for natives. This happened to the Amish. So Regeneron, with the University of Maryland, did something groundbreaking. In 2 years, they sequenced all 400 Amish people, and they took advantage of the Amish religion because they're supposed to help everybody, and they're non-technical. They're a non-technical society. So they were willing to give up all of that DNA for very small clinics that did very basic things like vaccinations, and that was it. And I was at a conference with people just like you, and a couple of geneticists stood up and like, this is horrible. Like, why did you do this? Usually the population either gets free drug or they get royalties. And Regeneron said, no, we decided if we do it for them, we're gonna have to do it for everybody. So they didn't do anything. They gave the Amish nothing. So if you know anything about anti-cholesterol drugs, well, I'll go through this first. So this is from a population of Northeast Germans from 325 years ago who purposely, by culture, only bred with each other. So they knew they were going to find a high frequency of these high cholesterol variants that they can base their drugs on. So they wanted to look at the mechanism of why they have high cholesterol and then make a pharmaceutic that counters it, right? So if you can get this much money and this much information out of 400 people from 325 years ago, what is going to happen when you move to the Americas? We've been hired by ourselves for 40,000 years in a place where humans never existed for. We had new microbiomes, new plants, new insects, and a whole bunch of bottlenecks like they talked about in the previous session. So these two continents are ripe for exploitation in this regard. In 2025, Lipitor was 17 billion worldwide for one company. They're estimated, this is all cholesterol drugs, 17 billion worldwide. In 233, that's an estimated 29 billion for all cholesterol medications. Lipitor made 2 billion last year. The 5th most popular one made 1.2 million last year. Market life, either with patent or without patent, is 7 to 20 years. Conservative calculation, like just for the Amish, they should have gotten some portion of $700 million. Liberal, if you want to say their patent's going to last, or their generics are going to last, or the popularity of the brand's going to last, 500 million over 15 years, that's 7.5 billion. The Amish get nothing, just like indigenous people get nothing. We have increasingly public and private partnerships with federal agencies like the NIH, which are not fully transparent. So Regeneron is working with us and a bunch of other people in the Human Pangenome Reference Project, and they are not being transparent on their data sharing, how they're taking our data from public and moving it into theirs, whether or not they're going to go and get the names of our participants, and then, if they find somebody in that population that's worth looking at, that they're going to go and give them some big amount of money to participate in their study. Like, a lot of it is hidden. And then we have Palantir. Palantir has all of these government contracts. All the ones in green are government contracts. And a whole bunch of them are here in the United States, including, so this goes back to the corn. So in Canada and the United States, the tribes have some degree of protection because they have a recognized nation-to-nation relationship and sovereignty with the United States government. In Latin America, no government except for Bolivia has any protection for their native people. So right now, when they're picking up Central American immigrants and South American immigrants, they're collecting DNA. And that DNA goes to Homeland Security. That DNA either goes to Regeneron or to Palantir. I'm betting both. So I know enough biostatisticians that work across private and public sectors. They do what they call quality control. Whether it's quality control or actual discovery investigations, or if it's building algorithms, they're building it on our data. And they're not being transparent about it. So this has long been, this paper was what, 2008? But even before that, Native people have been targeted for special populations. Just like people with Mendelian diseases are looked at, we are looked at in the same way. People with Mendelian diseases, you want to find out the mechanism, like if they have brittle bone disease, and then make a drug for osteoporosis. Not for them, but for all the people who can afford osteoporosis drugs, right? The same thing happens with Polynesians and Native Americans and Australians, because we're basically a crashed petri dish. We've had several bottlenecks, we've had several adaptations to local environment, stuff that's not existent anywhere else in the world. So instead of a small Mendelian family of 300 people, you have, at least when Columbus got here, you had 250 million people who can provide you data for your pharmaceutics industry. So, well, I'm from South Dakota. My wife and kids are enrolled on the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. Well, they say, Mitaka Yasin, we are related, but none of us Indigenous people have control right now. There's a number of crops, chocolate, rubber, tobacco. In other places like Southeast Asia and Africa, they're dying from fungal diseases and other bacterial and viral diseases, but they're propagated by science, they're not propagated by seeds. So now they're coming back to Latin America and trying to get the original stocks and then breed in some hardiness. But they're not dealing with Indigenous people, they're dealing with Latinos. Latinos don't represent us. So that stuff, again, our indigenous, which was taken away 500 years ago, is being taken away again. So in this case, the United States, in its infinite wisdom, since they can get Native Americans or First Nations in Canada to participate, they want to take the data from our skeletons. Everything that's been collected in anthropology and archaeology that is not protected by NACRA, NACRA only protects on the reservation or federal lands. If it's a private funded research project on private land, that data can go to the United States government. So they're trying to take all of that data, harmonize, curate it, condition it to give it to NIH, DBGAP, and Big Pharma. So it's circumventing, again, tribal sovereignty. This slide, this is the HGDP project, which is a private project with Stanford, National Geographic, and a few other people, Simons Foundation. It was roundly critiqued in the 90s. No ethicist wanted to touch it. The NIH didn't want to touch it. Nobody wanted to touch it. They just resequenced all of those samples in 2022, and they're asking ethicists to rubber stamp it and try to somehow rehabilitate the way it was collected. And again, nobody wants to touch it. HPRC doesn't want to touch it. Nobody wants to touch it because they're bad. They were collected bad. And then this paper came out last week in Nature, and everybody's mad. Well, anybody who's Indigenous or Indigenous ally is mad about the picture. I'm mad about the data, right? And then prior to that, there was this other paper that was done in Mexico, again by Latinos. They worked out some agreement with Chan Zuckerberg and gave Mexican data to an American company. So in the 2020 paper, just to prove that we are very, very different, they had 76 people, 5 groups, 59,000 new SNVs, total, 4,000 absent from public databases, 117,000 were new or ancestral to the Americas, 29 to 118 per exome were new. In the 2026 paper, it was more of Latin America. It was 128 people, 8 countries, 45 groups, 28 language families. 12.5 million SNVs were found, 1.5 million were absent from public databases, 270,000 were new, and there were about 11,000 per individual. That is a lot of uniqueness that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world because of how we evolved here by ourselves. So this is just a Smithsonian magazine of the paper that came out in Nature. And all of that data isn't even here in the United States, it's at the EU. Lately, in the last 5 years, a lot of indigenous data, whether it's collected in Anglo-America or Latin America, is not stored in the United States where tribes can get at it. It's stored in the EU databases. So it's even one step removed. Like, I forgot what she said. She's like, we saved your lives. Like, it's even worse, right? So it's not just you screwing us. It's the original ones that are over there that are screwing us. Going to the autoimmune thing. So we at NativeBio have been doing this study since 2009. RA, scleroderma, and lupus are highest in Native Americans anywhere in the world. We share some of that with African Americans and people from Polynesia. We don't share genetic ancestry. So I don't think that these autoimmune diseases are genetic. I think that they're socio-demographic, and I think that they have to do with forced admixture, rape. Because there is a hypothesis out there that says Y haplotypes from Europe on the mitochondrial background of Native women produces this phenotype. I don't know if you agree. 2 to 3 times higher than whites. In some tribes, it's 5 to 15 times higher than whites. So this is an average. Just in percentages, it's 7% versus 2%, earlier onset at 40 years old. And juvenile idiopathic arthritis is almost not heard of in any other population except for Native Americans. And 40% were northern Native American. And in South Dakota, I think it's, out of all, there's, what is there? About 120,000 natives in South Dakota. It was like 13% of those children have juvenile idiopathic arthritis. And the thing, what we found out in our study, that most are RA factor negative cases. So there's 3 diagnostic tests for RA. They come up short on all of them. So they have RA if the doctor takes time to do a higher evaluation. But if they're only reliant on the diagnostic test, that's all they're going to do, and they're going to get sent home with Advil. Again, Mexicans and Central Americans are proxy populations for American Indians, and there's a lot of sort of non-transparent stealing of data. So I know the people down at Texas Biomed, they have both the Strong Heart study and they have the San Antonio Hispanic study. Anything they find from Mexicans that they think they can find at higher frequencies than Native Americans, they do it. But again, to the RA thing, whether it's genetic, RA is only about 12% heritable, 65% heritable if you listen to other people. I'm going to go with the lower one because I think the heritability has more to do with social determinants of health than anything else. So 2/3, at least in our population, had false negatives. The SNP variant associations with other populations with IR was less than 5%. Out of 9,000 variant matches of citrullineated proteins, only 9 are unique to the tribe where that was under study. Likely a microbiome trigger. We have some data, very compelling data, that's a microbiome trigger that triggers it in siblings from the same family, but one of them has it, one of them doesn't. Brazil sent a lot of Amazonian data to Vertex. Somebody was mentioning Vertex. So we're sort of being undermined again. And if you look at this paper, the second largest amount of SNP diversity after Africa is the Americas. This is just more of the same papers. Mexico is collecting native data like crazy without much respect for indigenous populations because they're not protected. This is some of the work that I did in my master's degree about ADME absorption of drugs. So usually we only do liver and kidneys, but nobody was looking at the microbiome until myself and a few other Mexican colleagues hipped them to the fact that little kids of Mexican indigenous descent will not lever press for morphine when they're in the hospital because they get all kinds of immune dysfunction, they start throwing up. They would rather have the pain from surgery than press for morphine. And we test their liver enzymes, we tested their kidney enzymes. It's not explained by that. It's got to be some third factor that we don't have research dollars for. So all of the stuff I'm talking about, the NIH or nobody else will give us money to look at because we know locally what's going on and we know how to ask the questions better, but they will not give us the money. So like even for this, they won't give us the money to figure out why Native American and Mexican indigenous kids don't like morphine, right? There was another cardio pharmaceutic study where they couldn't figure out why these Mexicans were not getting any cardiac benefit from the drug. It turned out that their gut microbiome was chewing up the drug. And we only found that out by accident. So my wife is on warfarin. She had an aortic valve transplant. And this is my master's thesis. This is a drug of narrow therapeutic index, worked out in Europeans. The average dose is 5 milligrams a day. In this study, it was 5.6 milligrams a day for white people. African Americans can go up to 10, so twice the dose, but the average in the United States is about 6.8. And then for the study that we did, which was combining highly admixed natives from Montana with non-admixed people from Alaska, we got 4.2. But when we did the Alaskans by themselves, I don't know if I have it on here. No, I don't. When we did the Alaskans by themselves, anybody want to guess the dosage for them? Is it closer to 4, 5, 7?
2.
Lower. It was 0.5. It's 10 times less, because it's a combination of their genetic background and their high fish diet. If they didn't eat fish, they could get away with 2, 2.5. But nobody cares to ask those questions except an indigenous person. And so vitamin K is very highly interlaced with vitamin D, so my wife is having trouble. So my wife's only a quarter native, and I was worried about her dosing, and I yell at the doctors all the time because I like that. And just recently her dosage started going crazy, and it's probably because of her parathyroid. And if you know that Native Americans that are not mixed compared to the ones that are mixed have a completely different vitamin D storage system. So if you have some alleles that are from Europeans that, you know, you have lighter skin so that you make vitamin D in your skin, but you have dark skin, you're going to be at even a lower deficit than somebody that doesn't have that admixture. So I think right now my wife's parathyroid is going crazy because she's vitamin D deficient, and so her warfarin dosing's all over the place. But again, we don't have money to study those things. We talk about precision medicine, we talk about the Olives Project, but we do all of this data collection on the research altruistic side, but on the development side, like who's going to make the drug, who's going to pay for the drug, how is the drug going to get distributed or disseminated, that's all private, that's all profit. So if you have a small population or an outlier population, you're not going to make a drug for them, and if you do, you're going to put it at a really high price tag where they can't buy it. So that's the problem with this whole idea of altruistic precision medicine. So this all started with the Bayh-Dole Act. I used to hate the Bayh-Dole Act, but now I love it. Because as I said at the beginning, the Bridge to AI folks were fighting with the NIH the whole last day about protecting the data and making sure that they protected their participants and were honoring the consent, because they didn't want to get sued as the University of South Florida. They didn't want to get sued as researchers or graduate students. So they're like, the Bayh-Dole Act was there so that we can do that. With the University of South Florida, we can protect the data, we can license the data, we can have managed access. And they're like, no, you have to put it in dbGaP. And everybody's like, dbGaP is not for voice data. Like, what are you talking about? It's not for AI data. So they were just fighting and fighting and fighting. And so there was a bunch of ethicists and lawyers in the room and said, University of South Florida is right. That's their right. dbGaP is stupid. NIH is stupid. And the NIH finally gave up and said, we never thought this far ahead. And everybody started laughing. And we were all laughing so hard, the NIH called their boss down, and their boss came to yell at us. So Bayh-Dole basically tried to solve the problem of all of this data, who it belongs to and how it's going to be commercialized. And university legal departments, not you, the researcher, get the money, and they get to make those decisions, and they get to decide who they're going to partner with, not you. You get some of the money sometimes, depending on the arrangement or contract you make with your university. But this is all like re-screwed around with the American Competes Act, which started in 2007, was authorized in 2022. It's got a bunch of stupid crap in it. Bunch of stupid crap. One of them is under the American Competes Act. So they're trying to protect American data, right? They're trying to monetize American data. But because they know what's going to go on with climate change, there's provisions in this new version where they can take species from other places and then have them not be counted as invasive species in the United States, and that they could sequence them and they can monetize them. They also have about 50 pages in there saying we don't want to share data with China. We have to protect all our data from China. You should go read it, it's really dumb. So that has resulted in this administration's policy, which was begun in April of last year, was ratified October of last year, and the NIH issued a notice right before Christmas, December 27th, saying that researchers, universities, and the NIH have to align with the DOJ's policy, which, if you go read this, it's also very stupid. The bulk data rule by Biden says you have to meet all these criteria before the DOJ can take control of your data set. This new executive order from the DOJ says if you have a data set larger than 1,000, they can have it, and it has to be centralized. And they're including, and so this is supposedly military, right? Homeland Security, they want to protect American citizens from surveillance and commercialism, but they've included all kinds of things as a biometric. So things you wouldn't consider biometric, like when they did contact tracing for COVID, that's a biometric. Low resolution retinal scans, that's a biometric. So they're throwing everything in the pot and they're claiming all the data. And when the lawyers from the universities went back to them and said, hey, you can't do this, what about consent? They said, we don't care about consent. We are going over the head of consent and saying it's for national security purposes. And this is the National Human Genome Institute. This has been in work for about 4 years. Like I said, since they can't get participation from natives, they're just going to get it from our dead bodies. And the UK Biobank, just got hacked, and they're selling all that data in China right now. The UK Biobank just last summer said, anything where you use ancient DNA methods, so if you died yesterday, but you were badly decomposed because you were sitting in the sun, or you were floating in a river, if you use ancient DNA on that body, that's ancient DNA. They're going to classify that as ancient DNA. So they keep broadening these things so they can take more and more data. So again, they're not giving us the money that we want to do the work that we want to do, but they want to put $25 million to do this over 3 years. So Crystal is sort of the author of this, right? You collect data on one side altruistically, and then the development and the benefits are supposed to come on the right side, but they never do, because in the middle magic happens. But it doesn't really happen. It never happens. Because nobody works out the deals ahead of time. Especially when you're talking about American Indians who get most of their health services from the Indian Health Service. The Indian Health Service is a treaty obligation. It is incredibly micromanaged by Congress. It often, I can't remember, I have it here, it often pays half or a third than other poor people get. So if you're on Medicare or Medicaid, you might get $10,000 a year in Medicaid services. Tribes who have a treaty obligation to get those services, Congress micromanages it sometimes so much that they get nothing for that year, or those people only get $2,000 per person that year. So this is a slide, this is from Crystal's paper. So then you get blamed, you have these stupid ethical fights, right? We, as ethicists, say, you have to do this right. It's their data, they should get benefit, both immediate, long-term, whatever. It's theirs. But the other ethicists from the other side say, oh, but these are life-saving measures. They're going to be left behind. They're going to be in a technological cul-de-sac because they never participated in genome research and health research. But then this just keeps going and going and going because, like I said, nobody manages the other side, which is the health delivery part. You collect the data either gets thrown away because they're all outliers in the statistic, or it gets monetized before some special mechanism of action, and the tribes never see any of that money. IRBs are shit. Really big shit. The way they're staffed now, there's usually no ethicist on an IRB. And I have somebody from UC San Diego who is an ethicist. She created the IRB system for all of California. She tricked them and put some stuff in there that was questionable. They approved it. And she's like, why'd you approve this? And they're like, because it's you. And she's like, that doesn't mean anything. And so then they got offended. They're like, don't tell us how to do our jobs. And she goes, I made your job, and you're not doing it right. You're embarrassing me. And they told her to mind her own business. We do have policies, but again, policies are not laws. Universities ignore them. The federal government ignores them. So these are the policies that are supposed to protect tribal data. The last one was January 25th, 2023, in the Biden administration, where data sharing was almost a mandate, but they had a lot of exceptions for tribes. And so now what people do is they go to Denver, they go to Phoenix, they go to Seattle, they go to somewhere where they know Indians are going to go for healthcare, and that's where they collect the data so they don't have to follow these policies. Yeah, I have 4 minutes.
Yeah, please, questions.
I don't like questions. I like telling you guys what to do. And so, again, other countries like the EU and their, what's it, GDPH, or GDPR, they're looking way better than the United States right now. Oh, this didn't really render. So behind this, in the blue slide, is talking about digital sovereignty, AI, and digital privacy. So after the Dobbs Act, there is no privacy in the United States anymore. Absolutely none. And so I have a friend in the IT business, creating software, working for the military, and he's like, wait a minute, you can't do this, what about privacy? And this military commander said, we don't have privacy, and it doesn't matter anyway. We're the military, we're Homeland Security. What you have is the right to try and hide your data. What the US government has is a right to break into your data. This is Homeland Security saying this. So, we are all bioproperty of the United States, especially Native people. As I said, we're unique. Not just us, but our plants, our microbiome, our dead. We are being considered as bioproperty of the United States, and we don't like it. So our network is growing super fast. I have a whole bunch of other slides, but I'm trying to get through. I don't think I'm going to get to it. This is the one I'm looking for. So if you don't know, we just had a big summit in Tucson. It's the second one we've had. It was very well attended, over 700 people, all Indigenous scientists, some tribal leaders, some tribal attorneys. So that started with the Global Indigenous Data Alliance, which is mostly a Pacific and Australia thing. We have the Indigenous Data Alliance, which has 3 umbrella groups underneath it here in the United States, which one of them is the U.S. Indigenous Data Sovereignty Network. And then we have Local Context, which is like a supra-legal thing for tracking data's provenance and origin. So if we ever had a favorable government where we could sue and get our stuff back, we have a record in the National Library of Congress. But with that, I will stop and take questions.
Thank you, Joe. So we'll take just one question, and then everyone can mob Joe at the break. We'll just go, yours is the first hand I saw.
Hello. So first, I want to say I also enjoy Yracheta, so thank you for that. So I love your talk, and then I love the talk right before you. And there's a tension between extraction of the land, of people, of information, and also this sort of tension of asking the right questions to benefit the right people, sometimes humanity at large. So where do you see, I want to get your thoughts on, like, where do you see a balance between this and, like, to protect sort of humanity essentially in marginalized groups?
So I didn't get to that part. So Crystal and I, and 4 other institutions were part of something. So the federal government gave us $12 million. They cut it down to $9 million. We spent $3 million of it, and then Trump took away $6 million of it. But we were there to create a data sharing system that was equitable and protected for tribes, all 574 tribes. But they took that money away, and now they're whispering about doing it again with people that are going to be tokens and give them what they want. But we built a lot of stuff, and we still have it at NativeBio. The only thing I have a criticism about us doing that is because we're playing this race to the bottom, right? The more data that you have and the more protections that you have, whether it's smart contracts or ledger systems, you need bigger and bigger data centers to track that stuff, right? And that's bad for the environment. So while you're trying to make everybody's health better, you're making the environment worse. So, but it's all because rather than being a cooperative society, we're all together in this, we're a competitive society and everybody's trying to protect their money.
Well, thank you so much. Everyone mob Joe at the break.